All right, this is the follow up, and we are following up today on a live video entitled Show Preparation Lady Day. My guest today on the follow up is the great Shelton Becton. Shelton, thank you so much for being here today, and welcome to the follow up.
It's my pleasure. Good to see you, George.
Same here, man. Absolutely. So, for those listening, for those watching, let me just give you a little bit of background on Shelton and my history, and then we'll get into the subject of this video, which is the show Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill. Shelton and I did a show together starring the great Audra McDonald called Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill. And that was in, I believe, 2014 or 2015
Yes.
at the Circle in the Square Theater in New York. And the show basically uh, was set in 1959 in Philadelphia, and the theme or the subject of the show was Lady Day. Billie Holiday is doing one of her very last performances and basically recounts part of her life, right? Shelton was the MD and piano player of that show. I was the bass player, and we formed a trio together with our drummer Clayton Craddock, who played behind uh, Lady Day, which was portrayed by Audra McDonald. And in the live video, in the show preparation video, I sort of spelled out my concept or my process on preparing for that show, which included listening to a bunch of music from that era, which included learning songs, learning transcribing solos, trying to get a good sound on the upright, and all of those things. And I thought that it would be really interesting to hear how Shelton approached the same subject, like the preparation that went into Lady Day.
hmm
So, Shelton, let me ask you right now, how did you prepare for this particular show? Because that was, from what I understand, it was somewhat out of the ordinary to have this particular subject, to have this particular music, only be in a trio on stage. How did you prepare for all of that?
The first thing I did in trying to prepare for this show was to get as much background as I could on Billie Holiday,
Mm,
studying her history and listening to so much of her music.
right.
There's a plethora of things on YouTube that I was listening to, and then of course, growing up listening to all kinds of music,
Right.
being exposed to all different kinds of music. I sort of, everyone has played God Bless the Child,
Right. Right.
you know. So, but hearing her sing it
Yeah.
gives it a whole different twist.
Oh yeah.
So I listened to her, and then during the rehearsal period, working every day
Mm,
with the director and Audra and the music
super.
orchestrator
Yeah. Yeah.
helped me to really hone in on what that whole style was about. And then when you learn that this is like the waning years of her life,
Right.
and she's going to be telling you things that have happened, all those things came into play.
Right.
Looking at the music and seeing how the chord structures were done in that time, how the difference in the way they would accompany a singer back then as opposed to how they do now.
Yeah.
A lot of times the piano players now overshadow the singer.
Right. Right. Right.
But back then, you were definitely the bed
Right.
that the singer sang on.
Right.
And,
Right.
and not that you didn't have room to be
Right.
creative,
Right.
but you definitely knew that your role was to support.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So
Right. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
all those things helped me to prepare for that. And of course, the practice,
Yeah.
practicing getting those things under your fingers so that it feels natural.
Mm.
All those things. Yeah. Those are things that helped me.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it kind of ties in, like in my live video, ties into what I described in the live video.
hmm
I was talking about, the fact that the show is set in 59, and starting from 57 to like 57, the late 50s, basically early 60s, you had like a shift in jazz, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You went like from the bebop into hard bop, but now starting with 58, 59, when kind of blue came out, now you're going into this modal area.
Hmm.
So all of a
Hmm.
sudden, it's like it's a big change in
Right.
jazz music, right?
Right.
And in my opinion, that would have been reflected in the playing of 1959, in in what the musicians, how the musicians sounded like. So
Hmm.
that was definitely what you said in terms of going back and listening to accompaniment from back then,
Hmm.
you know, ties in directly with that kind of detailed nuances that were necessary.
Hmm.
That I cannot help but also just bring up the fact that playing the show with you definitely made it feel incredibly authentic. You are originally from North Carolina, I understand. You went to Howard University.
Hmm.
You had been playing with Roberta Flack for many, many years as her piano player, as her MD.
Hmm.
I understand that there's also some connection to Donny Hathaway. Is that correct?
Well, more with Roberta.
More with Roberta,
And
yeah.
I have a slight connection with Donnie. In fact, um, he when he was preparing for his last album, he
Mm,
was preparing before he passed.
mm.
Um, One of my songs was supposed to be on his album,
Right, right,
but of
right,
course that never happened.
right,
But I grew up listening to Donnie and Roberta,
right,
and every when I was at Howard University, sometimes he would come to D.C., and I would make sure that I was always there wherever he was performing.
right, right,
Um, he was just an amazing musician,
right,
and I connected that with my association with Roberta
right.
because when you admire a singer or a performer,
Yeah,
and you want to be a part of them somehow.
right.
I had always dreamed of playing with Roberta Flack.
Mm. Check that out.
I happened to hear her. I was doing, I think it was Ain't Misbehaving in Toronto.
Right.
And Roberta was performing in Toronto at that time, and I went to see her.
Right.
Luckily, we had a connection between a friend of mine that I did the whiz with and Roberta.
Mm.
And she got in touch with Roberta and told her that I was coming.
Cool.
And I came backstage and met her for the first time, and it was the best.
Mm.
It was absolutely the best. When you meet one of your idols and the people you've idolized all these years, and you get to see them in the flesh, and they talk to you, and they, you know, give you some of their time. It's one of those things that you don't forget.
No, no, for
And
sure.
and eventually, I got to work with her during a show called The Colors of Christmas,
Mm.
in which, but at that time, I was working with Patty Austin
Right.
as her music director, and Patty and Roberta were on the same show.
Mm.
We got to work together, and from that, I got to be Roberta's music director.
Wow. Well, I
That's how
mean,
that happened.
that's how that went, and then you take all of that and you put it into this character that you were playing
Yeah,
at
yeah,
Lady
all those.
Day. Like
Hmm.
that's, I mean, that's it couldn't be any more fascinating because there you have like the real life inspiration, and on the other hand, I mean, we were supposed to we were on stage, just for the audience who probably may or may not have seen the show.
Right.
We were on stage directly behind Billie Holiday, as
Hmm.
played by Audra McDonald,
Hmm.
and so we were visible throughout the entire show. Right?
Right.
They
Right.
had suits for us. I never had a three-piece suit before in my life. The best looking suit that I ever had. Seriously. But nevertheless, so we were visible,
Yeah.
and what you just described as meeting Roberta Flack, meeting your
Hmm.
idols, right?
Hmm.
Your character in the show was definitely that person when it came to Billie Holiday. That
Hmm.
that was his
Hmm.
idol. That was his, that was his big star that he wanted to work with, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And it was noticeable that obviously some of that inspiration or some of that train of thought went into, what was the name of the character? It was Jimmy, right?
I was Jimmy Powers.
Jimmy Powers. There you go, Jimmy
Hmm.
Powers. So awesome. You know, there's that. One thing that came to my mind over and over was the specificity that Billie Holiday brought to her music. Right. In preparing for the show, I listened a lot to the live at Carnegie Hall recordings. Right.
Hmm.
And especially in the newer versions of those recordings, there is like bonus material where you can hear her talking to her musicians and kind of breaking down,
Right.
you know, what she wants to, how she wants certain songs to sound, right?
Hmm.
So my question to you, or you know, this is less a question, more like a thought that I wanted to propose to you, is that the idea of specificity in a show like this or in an endeavor like this, right? Um, a lot of times I heard, when I told people that I was doing the show, you know, I heard what came back to me was, oh, you're just playing a bunch of standards, you know, and you're just winging it basically, right? And I was like, that's not really what we're doing. So what is your take on that? The specificity, the coming up with parts, coming up with, you know, specific arrangements, a way how to play. To a certain degree, you've already answered that, but what is your take on all of that?
Well, a lot of it was done.
Right,
You remember there were like five pieces we played before the show started.
right, right.
In those pieces,
Yeah,
we got to set the tone of the show
right.
because knowing the style
Mm,
that was prevalent at that time,
yeah.
if you didn't know what that style was, you could miss. First of all, you would mislead the audience into what they're about to hear.
Oh yeah.
And because we had done our homework, we studied, we listened, we the feel of working with Audra
Yeah,
during the rehearsal period when it was just piano and voice,
yeah.
working with her, and every day she would come in with a different piece of information
Mm,
that added to the feel of the show.
right.
She was like a walking encyclopedia
Yeah.
in terms of what Billie Holiday was about. I mean, even to the point where she felt like she was channeling Billie
Oh yeah.
at every show.
Yeah.
Um, Getting that feeling under your belt, getting to think that way, getting to um, fine tune what you
Right.
do so that it
Yeah.
matches what the singer is doing. Because there was so little other instrumentation going on,
Right. Right.
you had to capture that style quickly.
Right. Yeah.
We didn't have horns. Remember, we didn't have horns. We didn't have strings. We didn't have anything except piano, bass, and drums. So
Yeah.
we had to be so on point with that
Yeah.
style, learning
Yeah.
how, looking at the music, but yet listening to Audra because she may not do exactly what's on
Yeah.
that paper.
Right. Right.
Learning where she was going at the time, making that fit so that it
Mm.
became an ensemble within all of us. Those kinds
Yeah.
of things were what made the show work, I believe. And I think my take on preparing for that kind of thing is just fine tuning and
Yeah.
listening, and
Yeah.
absorbing all those things that style entailed. Otherwise, like as those folks said, we could have been just doing standards. That is not what we
Right.
were doing. We
Right.
we
Right.
we were also, in a way, channeling the musicians from that time period, so that the
Yeah.
show felt authentic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I
Mhm.
totally agree. I totally agree. It was noticeable to me that the minute I would say in a conversation, you know, I would say, well, we're actually trying to play parts. You know, we're trying to be authentic, be correct to the time. It raised a couple of eyebrows.
Mhm.
I think people did not
Right.
expect that. You know,
Right.
but I also think that once we had the audience there and once the audience kind of heard it, um, I believe that you know, and this is not taking anything away from Audra. This is certainly not taking anything away from the director or the
Mm-hmm.
playwright, right? But I think that the music, definitely the way we played it, influenced them into getting into that era,
Indefinitely.
getting into, you know, Emerson's, like,
Definitely.
Emerson's is a
Yeah.
fictional
Yeah.
place. I
I
mean,
mean, the
yeah,
intimacy of that little
yeah,
room, we had to
yeah,
capture that on a big
yeah,
stage. We had to
yeah.
make it feel like it
700
was
people.
just, in fact, I think they said there were maybe only 10 people in the whole audience for her last performance.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah,
had to capture that. So it wasn't about being flashy.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
about finding what that style does, welcoming the audience into what we were doing to the point where they
Mm,
stopped talking and
yeah,
started listening to the
yeah,
band.
yeah.
We got applause before Audra even came on stage
That's true.
after every song.
That's true.
Something
I
about that let me know that we were doing our job, that we were transporting them back into a time that many of them knew nothing about.
I had completely forgotten about that, but you're totally right.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You're totally right. This I had, man. I didn't even think about that. It's brilliant.
Yeah, we had 5 songs to set the tone for the whole show.
Yeah, that's correct.
You
You're
know,
totally right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There were moments also in the show, because you said, like, we didn't have the strings, we didn't have the horns. Sometimes we didn't have the drummer. There were moments where there was no drums and it was
you're
just
right.
bass and
It's just
piano, right?
bass and piano, exactly.
And if I remember this correctly, and I thought this was a brilliant move on part of the sound design of Steve Canyon.
Hmm.
Like, in those moments, he actually turned the microphones off, so it was really just acoustically, right?
Hmm.
And I mean, again, like, a brilliant move, because
Hmm.
very often, like, the quieter stuff gets, the audience really has to just sip it. All right.
Yes, they do. Yes, they
So
do.
this,
That's what I tell my singers all the time that I work with. I said, the quieter you sing, the more they will listen.
mm, that's deep. Which actually, let me just do a quick side note, because you have an incredible career, and I do want to point that out. As great as you are as a piano player, you are also a fantastic 4 octave range singer, and part of your career is this singing endeavor,
Hmm.
singing arrangement, and all of that. So I this kind of ties in with another live video that I did, which I entitled "The Best Seat in the House: Playing Behind Singers," because
Hmm.
it's a forte. It's something that I enjoy tremendously, and
Right.
it's a forte of mine. It's sort of an emphasis in my career, right? Um, how did all of that influence you? What was your take on playing behind Audra, and playing behind Audra, who's now channeling Billie Holiday, like, as a singer
Hmm.
who's, really really accomplished.
Well, I think the singing part of my life also helped me to understand and to hear Audra
Mm,
as Billy,
yeah.
to hear not the but and because I sing, I understand how singers think.
Check that out.
Because of that, I mean, I was trained. I started singing in churches when I was 7,
Right,
and played for church choirs and all that throughout college, and
right,
still do, in
right,
fact.
right,
But that kind of training, learning how to follow a singer, learning how to almost anticipate where
right,
the singer is going,
right,
all those things helped me.
right.
And even with the little piece, I remember in rehearsal, there was a piece they wanted me to sing in one of the songs in the show, and I can't remember which one it was now. But
I,
I sang it in Audra's range,
mm,
and they looked at me. They said, they said, "That is beautiful. However, you cannot sing it in that range."
yeah.
So they made me sing it an octave lower so that there would be a contrast
Right,
between
right. Of
what
course,
I was doing and what Audra did.
of course,
Um,
of course.
yeah, but the singing part has always been an asset. for me in working with all the singers I work with, even to the point of knowing how to blend with them if there was a duet, knowing how to follow them
Right.
basically,
Right.
and knowing what style that singer does. For instance, playing for Patty Austin was totally different from playing with Roberta Flack or Judy Collins. Totally different.
Yeah.
You had a different kind of freedom. You had a different kind of approach
Yeah.
to working with them,
Yeah.
to working with each of them,
Right.
and learning the pros and cons of each singer's style,
Right.
knowing what that is, and knowing instinctively what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, all those things come into play, and my training as a singer helped me along the way. I mean, it was, and I've had some of the best vocal coaches I think in the world when I was
Oh
at
wow.
Howard University. I really
Okay.
think I had some of the best coaches in the world because they not only taught me the classical literature,
Right.
but they allowed me also to sing the pop literature. In fact, I was in a vocal group with Tuatha Ag and Angela Winbush, and you know, Richard Smallwood was in my group at one point.
Of
You
course.
know, so we major singers,
Right.
just
Right.
major singers, and all those things helped me along the way.
Fantastic. Now that's that. Yeah, that's. I thought that there was going to be some influence or some sort of cross pollination between being a singer, being an accomplished studio singer and live singer, being an accomplished piano player, and then portraying this fictional character of Jimmy Powers, playing behind a fictional Billie Holiday, who's now Audra McDonald, who's really known for a completely different style of singing. Let's not
Exactly.
I mean, that difference cannot be overstated enough. Like
Right. Right.
it is
It's true.
night and day,
I mean,
and
and the thing about it was Audrey was so convincing
right.
that when she opened her mouth, people gasped
Yeah, that's true.
because they thought they were good, they were hearing Billie Holiday.
That is true. That is absolutely true. Yeah, yeah. This
I remember that.
from
I
the
could
very first
literally, I
note
could,
on.
yeah,
Yeah,
from the first note on,
yeah,
I remember that. I was like, now that means you've done your homework.
yeah, yeah. No doubt, no
Mhm.
doubt. This, yeah, this. It's funny now that we're talking about this. I got like flashbacks going on. This
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. There was that first note, the minute she started singing, and
Mhm.
there was a gasp coming
Mhm.
from the audience. They
Mhm.
did not expect that. That's
Yeah. And then
and,
whatever little bit I had to sing, I had to also stay within
hmm
that style
right, right,
so
of
that it
course.
matched whatever Audra had done before.
Right, right, right. Of course, of course, of course. Fantastic. Now, this is. I mean, this is really. This is exactly why why I was so curious about having you on the follow up. This again, like we are on the same stage, we're playing the same piece of music, and we're having two different experiences. That are somewhat similar because we both have did a lot of homework on this music.
Right.
But again, like I don't hear music the way you hear music, and you don't hear music the way I hear it.
Right.
That's just what it is. Like I went into, Paul Chambers. I went into Oscar Pettiford. I went into Ray Brown. I went all the way back to Milt Hinton, who also recorded with Billie Holiday.
Right.
I went to, of course, my all-time favorite, Israel Crosby. I went to Ron Carter playing behind singers, which is a different Ron Carter
Mm-hmm.
than instrumentally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have different approaches, but we had to play the same piece of music, and I
And what a
thought,
great combination when all those things came
oh
together.
yeah, oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt. There's also you being from North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina has, and this is something that only recently has sort of a theme that has gone into my live videos, which is the regionality of Black music, of African American music, and African American
Mm-hmm.
artistic expressions.
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina has a very unique sound. That's
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna put that out there, but
Mm-hmm.
I'd like you to talk about it. What would the North Carolina sound? What does that represent to you, or does that even represent anything?
Well, yeah, because having grown up there and worked in the churches and listening to the music that was most prevalent at that time, a lot of the gospel stuff was maybe James Cleveland or Mahalia Jackson or those kinds of people. But at the same time, there was also the folk
Mm.
influence.
Check that out.
The folk influence was so strong.
Right.
Roberta Flack she's such a proponent of that.
Check that out.
Even to the point of sometimes during her show, she would stop in the middle of it and just do an old folk song that was from North Carolina.
Right.
That that kind of music seeded me.
Right. Right.
That kind of music growing up, and then hearing James Taylor,
Right.
who's from North Carolina,
Right. Right.
uh, hearing the plaintive sound of
Right.
that music.
Right.
It's not flashy,
Right.
but it is so soul rooted.
Right. Right. It goes right to the core. It
Goes
goes.
right to the core.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I think is what has been a good foundation for me.
Check
Knowing
that out.
knowing what that is and being true to that.
Yeah.
Not trying to um, copy
Yeah.
anyone else's style, but knowing what my interpretation of that style of music is has always been a part of everything I've written.
Check that out.
Of everything, and I've written spirituals, I've written R&B tunes, I've written classical pieces.
Right.
All of it
Right.
has its roots
Right.
in my upbringing and listening to that North Carolina sound
Right. Right. Right.
that I was brought up on.
Yeah. 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 Most definitely. There's. I don't. I'm sure you're familiar with Jerry Barnes.
Oh, indeed,
Catrice
indeed.
Barnes, right?
Yes, yes,
This
yes.
this also people from North Carolina, right?
Yeah,
What's the bass player? Chic,
yeah, chic, right.
Edwards, Bernard Edwards,
Mm-hmm.
originally from North Carolina, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very very unique sound, very
Right.
unique sound that you
Yeah.
can only that comes from that region. That's I mean me as you know being born and raised in Vienna. This well, certainly not a. I'm not an authority when it comes to that, but I can hear that there's something there.
Yeah, and see, I played with Jerry Barnes and Sherrod Barnes.
Sherrod, yeah, exactly, yeah,
All of us played with Roberta Flack at
right,
the same time.
right.
So imagine there are four of us on stage
That's crazy.
with that North Carolina sound in our bones.
Right, right.
And so the sound had to be different from what you were normally going to hear.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, working with those people and absorbing their influence and mixing it with mine,
yeah, yeah.
all those things
Yeah,
came.
most definitely, most
Yeah.
definitely. Now that's fantastic, and all of that went into again. It's I keep repeating that because it's important for the audience to realize like all of that went into Lady Day. You know, among
All-
all the other endeavors of your career, like, but
Mhm,
that being a part that we're talking about right now,
mhm,
all of that North Carolina sound, Howard
mhm,
University,
mhm.
Roberta Flack, being a singer, being an accomplished piano player, being a writer, you know, all of that went into boom,
Yeah, yeah,
Lady
because
Day.
everything you do is a reaction to whatever you have been.
Right, right,
Uh, I can't help but believe every experience I've ever been through, from
right,
the beginning
right,
to now,
right.
has enabled me to be the artist that I am.
Yeah,
'Cause you can't you're constantly building
right.
on top of what you already know
Yeah,
and what you already feel, so
right,
that you start to expound on it and you start to grow and explore more, because you can't leave anything that you've ever experienced behind.
that's very true.
You take it all with you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Every
yeah.
time you sing, every time you play, whatever your experiences have been,
Right,
that's what you're doing.
right, right,
Every time you perform,
right.
every experience, every singer you've worked with, every show you've done,
It all
is
comes
all a
out.
part of what you are right now.
Right. Right, 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 right. That's so deep. That is so deep. It's in preparing for talking to you today, I went back to listen to the live video, and this I'm not going to keep you very much longer. This is
That's
kind of
okay. Okay.
my last point. But
Hmm.
I went back to the live video, and I listened back to it, and at the beginning of the video, I sort of had to give the audience a disclaimer, and my disclaimer was, listen, if you're squeamish about political topics,
Right.
I'm not that person, as you well know. I am not. I'm not the one. I'm
Hmm.
not the one to shy away from it or to
Hmm.
negate that.
Right.
And especially when it comes to Billie Holiday, it's impossible for me, at least. Also with my background and being art son and
Hmm.
being like having like a generational not only generational but genetical link to that time, right?
Hmm.
um it is impossible for me not to include the political situation, include
Right. Right.
the her emphasis and her importance when it
Hmm.
came to being a political figure, and
Hmm.
being completely ostracized and whatnot. Um, so that is something that I wanted to bring up with you as well, because it is such a big part of Billie Holiday's life, and therefore, it probably influenced somehow what we did and what Audrey did. Was it something that was on your mind? The segregation that she faced, the life that she lived. I mean, let's not forget she died handcuffed to a bed. Okay,
Hmm.
so how did you approach that? Let me ask you this, because obviously it's part of your
Well,
it is
yeah,
on your mind.
because I grew up during segregation
There you go.
in North Carolina.
Right.
I mean, I, how do I put this? The Ku Klux Klan
Right.
were very prevalent in my neighborhood
Right.
to the point where when they started trying to integrate schools,
Mm.
the Ku Klux Klan tried to frighten the black families by
Right.
burning crosses in their yards.
Right.
My father was having none of it.
Right.
He made sure that they knew who he was in the community
Right.
and that they did not try to pull any of those tricks on him.
Right.
Um, so hearing Billie Holiday talk about how she wasn't allowed to eat in certain places, I know what that is.
Right.
I've seen the white only and colored only signs.
Right.
I know what that is all about. I know how you are treated differently, though you may have the same skills
Right.
as someone of a lighter hue. I remember when I was maybe about 10 or 11 years old, I was asked to participate in a charity called the March of Dimes,
Right.
in which they would raise money for children who had diseases and stuff. And so I was asked to come and play.
Right.
Now, this was for a radio station in my hometown.
Mm.
Uh, so I show up with my aunt,
Right.
who was one of my staunchest supporters. And so I'm sitting ready to play. And then the newscaster looks at me and goes, "And who are you?" And I gave him my name. He said, "And what are you gonna do?" I said, "I'm gonna play the piano." He said, "Oh, really? You can play the piano?" I mean, as if to say that I was not qualified to be there,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then I went and played, and I think I remember I played Mendelssohn's War March of the Priests. And when I finished, there was silence in the room
Wow.
because they didn't believe I had done that. Imagine this little colored boy just played. Can you imagine? I mean, it was like, why was I not given the same respect
Right.
as everyone else? But I had to prove myself
Right.
before I was even accepted, even in that March of Dimes charity situation.
Right.
So I grew up knowing some of the things that Billie Holiday went through, which is why I think my participation in the show was so important for me.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right. Right. Right.
because
Right.
I
Right.
grew up during those political times. So it struck home with me when she was talking about how she couldn't even go in. She had to sit on the bus
Right.
before
Yeah.
she even performed.
Right.
She had to go to the back door to get food.
Right.
I know what that is.
Right.
I know
Right.
what all that's about.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that is an incredible perspective. That's an incredible vantage point, because that is important for the audience to realize how recent all of this shit went down.
Uh-huh.
Okay, this is not. We're not talking about 100 years. Okay,
Exactly.
this is very
Exactly.
very important. I mean, my 2 cents. Of course, I was born and raised on the other side of the world. But I do have that connection via art to this particular time and to that particular time. And I also have that connection via Addison, his twin brother, to who was a bass player, who by the way played with Mahalia Jackson. So when you
Okay.
hear some of those recordings, you hear what's my uncle on
Okay.
bass. All right,
That's great. That's
that's incredible. But I grew up with the stories. I
hmm
didn't grow up with the first hand. I grew up with my experiences,
hmm
being in Vienna and being a black kid in Vienna, or and that's a whole different bag.
hmm
But I did grow up with the stories and with the generational trauma that
hmm
was passed on basically.
hmm
And just like, and this is not, I'm not trying to set us on the same level or anything, but it was a big reason why I took that show so seriously and
Okay.
why I wanted to
hmm
present an authentic sound, right?
Yes,
And not just
indeed.
play a bunch of tunes.
Right.
This-
Right. Well,
this, you completely erase all of that when you just play a bunch of tunes.
it was impossible to play that show in a vacuum.
Yeah,
There was no way to do that,
yeah,
and be true to what was actually being said on stage,
yeah.
and to be a background for what was coming. There was no way you could just be absent
Right, right,
and play that show.
right,
There
right,
was no way. I
right,
mean, it was interesting to me when some of my colleagues came up to me after they had seen me do the show, and they kind of looked at me like, we had no idea
mm,
of how deep this was. He said, that was amazing to watch that show.
right,
It was not just playing notes.
right,
It was about being actually transporting us back to where
right.
that whole thing happened. And they kind of looked at me like, I didn't know you could do that. Well, trust me, I didn't know I could do it either. Because, to be honest, I had never done that much acting before.
Right, right,
So and thank God the director and Audra and all those were so patient with me
right,
till
right,
I got the act. Because once I got the piano stuff down, that was it was okay.
right,
The acting part, making sure that what I was representing as an actor was commensurate with what I was playing,
right,
so
right.
that I didn't feel like I was an actor out of water and didn't know what I was doing. I had that again took a little study, because when first of all, when you're acting against Audra McDonald, you better know what you're doing.
Oh yeah. Oh hell yeah. Hell
you
yeah. Yeah.
know, and they were so kind. All of them were so kind to me,
Mm,
helping me to understand what the style of that was, even in the way I presented
right,
certain phrases in my little dialogues. It was all a part of being a connected unit,
right, right.
and being able to get that experience is something I will never forget.
Oh yeah. Yeah, most definitely. Again, it kind of talks to attention to detail. I mean,
Yes,
the
yes.
most minute detail that perhaps doesn't even seem like such big of a deal to us doing it, playing
hmm
the show or whatever, you
hmm
know, translates completely different into the audience.
Yes, indeed.
It's
I mean,
and
even from the weight of holding the dog,
ah,
you know, all those
you're
things.
right. There was a dog. I completely forgot about that. Oh my god.
there was a way to do that
You're
so that
totally
it
right.
didn't look weird and strange on
Right,
stage.
right. No, you're totally right. This I completely forgot about that. Unbelievable. I mean, this it's somewhat a testament. The one thing, testament to being in the moment and playing, because I had forgotten about the dog. I had forgotten about the 5 songs at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Hmm.
For me, it was just it was just okay. This is the sound, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I'm not in 2015 or whatever. I am in
Right.
1959,
1959.
right? I'm
Exactly.
badass bass player in
Hmm.
Philadelphia who's playing behind Billie Holiday,
Right.
and who has just gotten off listening to kind of blue for 2 days straight or
Hmm.
whatever whatever I put up I came to in my mind. So
Hmm.
man, that is deep. Like I'm having total flashbacks right now. That's
Hmm.
crazy. On
Yeah.
that note,
Yeah.
so listen, Shelton, thank you so much for spending your time with me today, with
Oh,
with the audience. Thanks so much for your insight, your perspective. Um, I really appreciate you being here today. I think this was one of the highlights of my career so far. This
well,
this
thank
little
you,
show.
George.
There's no
It
doubt
was
about it.
always a pleasure working with you.
Oh, same here, man.
Indeed.
Absolutely,
Thank
absolutely. And
you.
let's just make sure we do everything to stay safe and stay sane, and hopefully we'll get back to this, in due time, whenever that might be.
Right. And good luck with your series. This is worth doing.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I love doing it. Thank you so much. I love doing it.
Worth
It's
doing.
it's it's
Thank
very
you.
it's entertaining, and at the same time it gives me something to think about and really fine tune. You
Good.
know, awesome.
Glad
Well,
to be part.
thank you so much, Shelton.
All right. Take care.
Later.